So my name is Deva. I am a faculty of, I'm a professor of marketing and sales at the ESX School of Management in Paris. But before that, I spent between 2003 and 2017, I spent 14 years working for a business school in Belgium called Vlerick. So I was a professor at Vlerick, where we started something like a sales competition to encourage young students to do sales role plays, and it still is taking place right now. We did the first sales kind of conference way back in 2012 and 13, not as popular as this at that point in time, but again, sales was actually picking up there. So after that, I left Vlerick in 2017 because I wanted to do more and more research. So I went to 2017 and we moved to the US. And I do not know why I moved to the US, because there was prime Trump period. But anyway, it still was okay. I was there in a small town. I got a chance to do a lot of research. My wife is French. She speaks better English than my French at all. And then last year, she said she wanted to move back, so we moved back to France. Right? So I've killed enough time. You've gotten used to my accent. And most importantly is the fact that you're probably wondering, you've seen fantastic, beautiful presentations. You're going to see a crappy presentation from your times at the University of Ghent, KU Leuven, with all the professors there as well. Right? I'm going to be sharing with you some insights, and the insights I'm going to be sharing with you are based on recent research projects. And the way we do research is that we do research by talking to executives. In fact, some of the executives that we spoke to are actually in this room. Luke is one, Paul is another. So essentially, where's Paul? Paul, right there. Yeah. So actually, I'll be sharing with you some insights on this. Right? How do you match your sales design? The presentation either will be made available to you by VR Sales, or I'll give you my contact details at the end. You can email that to me, and I can also give you other presentations that I've had a chance to make over the years. Right? So you'll see that essentially what I'm talking about is a changing sales paradigm. And essentially, why do I say the changing sales paradigm? It's mostly because unlike any other time in the past, COVID has changed the way we're doing business, not because we in sales are looking at it, because the customer is forcing us to do it. Does it make sense? Mm-hmm. In the past, we talk about CRM and we want to implement CRM. That was a company-driven initiative. Guess what? COVID came and now suddenly the customers are no longer in their offices. They're sitting in their homes. They're worried about the continuity of their business because their suppliers suddenly cannot deliver on time because of supply chain issues, or because their supplier is now, heaven forbid, stuck in China and maybe even in Shanghai, things like that, which means your products are not going to be here, but your business has to go on. So the customer now is looking for options, right? And I want to again see how many of you were paying attention to what was said, and then I'll get right into my presentation. How many of you remember this from the presentation from Gong? 53% of salespeople are not hitting their targets. Right? The interesting thing is that despite spending a lot of money on sales training and sales enablement, Luke is going to talk about that, 53% of salespeople are not hitting their targets. The funny thing is, it's not because the salespeople are not doing their job. It's because customers are not making decisions. There's a difference. Right? And that's something, before we start blaming it on the salespeople, we should start asking ourselves, is the customer making the decision, or it's fear by paralysis? I'm not going to make a decision now, it's somebody else's headache. That's one. The second thing, which is true, which is linked to this, who was there in the presentation by Koen de Witte? 11 to 20, do you remember this? I was paying attention. Because too many times as a student I've fallen asleep in class, so I thought I would pay attention. 11 to 20, the number of people involved in making decisions. If you thought 53%, that is a study by CSO Insights. That was in 2019. This is now. What does it mean? This 53% will probably go down to 35%. Right? This is 53. 35. My Nederlands is, ik zit op een pintje en stoverij met frietjes met stoverij, dat was een paard. So essentially what we're talking about is the whole idea of how things are changing, and this is my agenda probably for the next 15 minutes. see if we can get it over with, or we can always have a separate Zoom session for Renault and other people have also tried to look at as well. So I want to talk to you about certain general trends, but this is something that I'm going to specifically talk about McKinsey, right? The company where if some of you are paying expensive consultants, McKinsey does a lot of good job, but specifically at 1 year after COVID, they came up with this article. If you get a chance, read this article. Brilliant article. It talks about omni-channel sales. Why am I talking about it in terms of sales design and everything else? We need to start rethinking how we are doing sales because of what is happening due to COVID and the changes in the sales and the buying process, right? 2/3 of buyers prefer remote or digital interactions, right? We need to be looking more and more at omni-channel sales, and I'll show you an example of how one company is doing it. 20% of B2B buyers are willing to buy completely online, which is again something we could not think about, right? How many of you still believe that we have to do it face to face? Okay, so essentially one. But a lot of times, no, but it's okay. In a room so much, if I'm a sales manager, that's what it is, right? If I have a sea full of customers, and one customer says, I want the old way of working, what should I be telling my salespeople as a sales manager? You're an outlier. Unfortunately, I have to be smart about how I leverage my salespeople. So essentially, that is what we should be looking at as well, right? Again, I'm not picking on you, but it's just the way it is. That's just the way that we need to be looking at things as well. So again, you see all the numbers, right? Again, 85% of B2B sales leaders say that we should be moving into hybrid selling. What is hybrid selling now? Essentially, nobody still knows yet, right? Hybrid selling is it Zoom calls, is it Teams calls, or whatever call it is, Google calls? Or when do I take it offline? When do I take it online? Should I be looking at ways by which I should engage with the customers in the first part of the sales process, then take everything online, and then towards the end, should we be closing it? Or, hey, our company is investing in DocuSign and things like that, so even the signing of the deal can take place remotely. The question is, you know your business, you need to be looking at it from that viewpoint as well. What does hybrid sales mean? The problem is not with those salespeople who are okay with this. The problem is the salespeople that you have who now have to change the way they work. Does it make sense? That's essentially the bigger issue. We cannot afford to say, hey, we're going to let you go because you don't necessarily have a skill set. And that's again a challenge that you'll face as well, right? And of course, 77% of sales leaders have faced problems about people working from home. So you need to have very clear ways by which how you want to motivate them. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to go into each one of this. These are some of the things that we're increasingly doing research on as well. But if you're interested, send me a separate note and then I'll share some information with you as well. More interesting numbers. This is from McKinsey quarterly, but this last year, this was on the 20th, I think it was March 15th. It came out on March 15th. Why? It's significant because March 16th, 2020 is when we went into lockdown. So this article came in March 15th, McKinsey quarterly 2021. The next one is 2022. I would strongly urge those of you managing sales teams to actually read this article as well, right? One of the things which is on the top is that 55% of over 400 buyers that were surveyed in this study, they actually said that their sales teams are not necessarily ready to be able to sell properly, right? Now, of course, your organizations are always different, right? Your teams are much higher than that. This is other organizations, right? But the key is your B2B salespeople need to become omni-channel orchestrators. What does it mean? Is I need to start thinking about how I should be leveraging the different sources of information that we have in our organization and choose what approach works best with what customer. Right? What it also means is that if my salespeople need to decide that I am not going to physically visit my client, I need to have marketing collateral. You know what marketing collateral is, right? Also, how am I going to use that and what is the best way to do that? Now, some of you might be working in organizations where if I say marketing, the typical answer would be marketing is a black hole, money goes in, nothing concrete ever comes out from marketing. Marketing spends all the money that we work so hard to bring in. Unfortunately, those days you need to be numbered and you need to start looking at how can I better leverage marketing to provide the right kind of content, either to the people in the customer or the prospect's organization, as well as making sure that your own people also have access to it. Too many times I've seen situations where the customer knows more about your offering than your own salespeople. Right? Again, you have that kind of issue. I have to ask this. Are you Carl by any chance? Hola, comes back. The greatest CRM system is here. Carl Howard.
Yeah.
Man.
Good memory.
Yes. So essentially, we have you got a beard the last time we met. So again, we should be looking at sales structures. What do I mean by that? For those of you who saw the presentation by Kuhn, he had something where we had the sales funnel, and then he inverted this. I would strongly urge you to go look at the presentation of Kuhn De Witte, the previous session. So essentially, you have the funnel, and you have the inverted funnel where you said at the top, we need to be looking at choosing the right kind of opportunities, right? And that is increasingly a job combined for marketing and sales if your organization has a good marketing organization, right? And even within that, within marketing organization right now, the more advanced organizations are moving into separate roles between what they call strategic marketing, which does things like brand positioning, value propositions, and more the mark ops, right? What will be your mark ops? What kind of campaigns are we going to run? What are the different touch points? Where are we going to take a look at the customer journeys? And then how do we then try and use the relevant content? What is the right media to go looking at it? Which then means we should be rethinking our sales structures. The way we work right now, is it the right way? If you're working for traditional companies, not SaaS companies, if I say SDR, what would you think? Forget that, SQL. It is not structured query language. SQL stands for Sales Qualified Leads. I'm happy that there's a room full of salespeople here. But essentially, there are companies where if I go say SQL, it stands for Structured Query Language, SQL. Right? That's what it is. We need to be talking that kind of language, but we need to be looking at how are we going to be leveraging our best salespeople to the best possible clients. And how can we leverage marketing for that? Of course, you need to have more and more of this idea of value creation mindset. And another thing that was mentioned by Gong, how do we use references, right? Remember? She was talking about references. I honestly think that we should be translating that not about references, we should be talking about how salespeople increasingly have to become storytellers, right? Storytellers in terms of their saying and painting a picture about why, I believe Pascal will talk about it afterwards, why should you choose to change? Pascal, will you talk about why change, why now?
Yes.
And why us? Well, there you go. So Pascal will talk to you about that as well. So the idea is that you need to paint a picture, and unfortunately we live in a world today where clients don't trust your salespeople. Whom do they trust? Other customers who have been in a similar situation just like that. Look at your own. How is the customer any different from the way you act when you book your holiday? Correct? You trust TripAdvisor. You trust some random individual that you do not know but has just written a comment, rather than all the pictures that the client, that the supplier has put on their website. I call it the TripAdvisory of things. We trust other customers than what the salesperson is saying. So essentially we have that again as an issue. We need to be looking at that as well. And last one is change management is key. Before you start talking about tech, right, ask yourself, have we defined our sales process? Have we defined our marketing process? Is the marketing process or the sales process aligned to the customer's buying journeys? Then once we have it, then let's start talking about what is the salesperson doing, how is that going to change post introduction of tech, because it's very unfair to blame tech for many failures when you have not thought about your own sales and marketing process as well, right? And again, that's something that I just wanted to share with you, and I have more to share too, by the way. Yes, what are some changes to the B2B process? But now we're going more into the domain of where I come in. These are all, so you'll see some of the ugliest slides ever, right? You saw Kuhn's presentation, it was beautiful. Mine are the ugliest ones. Again, as I said, remember your time at the University of Kent or KU Leuven with your professors who would talk to the wall. That's exactly what it is. But here is what has happened, right? This is recent research where we actually went about and talked to sales reps in India, Italy, and the US. And we were talking about what they thought was happening to the sales process. This is across industries. So this is not just for SaaS companies or for established organizations. This is across the board. What is happening is you still have a set of sales leaders who think that change brought about by COVID was temporary and things are going to go back to normal. Right? Again, that is something that we have to learn to deal with. But there are a majority of the people that we spoke to talked about permanent changes happening about the way they sell, right? And that's got to do with using more and more e-commerce platforms to sell high value items as well, right? Of course, there's a difference between selling to a client for the first time as against repeat purchasing, right? Selling a client for the first time is quite different as against, like, you have to have repeat purchasing as well. Here is something, emphasis on upskilling and learning orientation of salespeople. In fact, what we say is that when you talk about upskilling and learning, we actually talk about unlearning. That is, unlearning all the bad practices of before and trying to do it for the newer practices. By the way, this happens first for sales leaders before it's for salespeople. Make sense? I'm sure probably you don't like what I'm saying, but sales leaders should first consciously unlearn. I heard the term consciously unlearn from Gwyneth Paltrow, when she said consciously decouple when she went for a divorce. Sorry about that. Right? And this is what is happening increasingly. We need to be thinking about well-being. Your salespeople are increasingly stressed, right? But of course, in certain parts of the world, you are talking about stressed salespeople saying, I'm going to quit my job even if I don't have a job in hand. How many of you have heard the term the great quit? The big resignation. Yeah, exactly. So essentially, they talked about it being in the US, but now they're talking about how in France, in the UK, it's all coming out here where people are saying, I can work remotely, I don't want to put up with all this crap, then I can find jobs and I'm going to do it. Again, is it going to be relevant to you? Maybe not. But then essentially, these are the permanent changes, and some changes were becoming a lot more critical. Focus on value-based selling. But the question is, what do I mean by value-based selling? Whose value? Who am I selling to? If there are 20 people out there, who are the people making the decisions? Who and I was paying attention? 11 to 20. I was. Right? Digitalization of the sales processes. But the key is sales process. What part of it has become digital? In fact, right now, we even talk about it as phygital, right? What is physical? What is digital? Right? And that's again something we need to be thinking about. And then of course, the last was utilization of data. For those of you who are operating in data-rich environments, it's very naive for you to be expending a lot of time just with your salespeople. You need to be looking at new roles like customer success managers. Customer success managers who are actually close to the data, close to the customer, understanding how that data can actually be translated into win situations for the client. And a lot of times going back to the clients and say how by investing in us, which is the promise sold by salespeople, you are getting the benefits, thereby contributing to success stories as well. That is again something we need to be looking at, which by the way, if you go back to the study by McKinsey by 2022, that's what they said. Your modern salespeople need to have newer set of skills, which includes data analytics if possible. Right? Again, that's a pipe dream, but still, this is from one of our research. Do not quote it yet because we also have, it is under review by a bunch of geeks. That's essentially what's happening. This was something we were extremely proud of because this is something that we started asking. Well, if that is the case, as a sales manager, how do I allocate my resources, correct? Which clients? You said you were working with 2 business reps, right?
Yeah.
The question is, where do my salespeople go to? Right? The question is, it depends upon those clients where what I'm doing, how complex is the task? That was a cool question. That is it a simple sale or is it a complex sale? For doing complex solutions, the complexity is going to be high. But the problem is, how much, if you only have 2 people, how much time should my sales reps be spending there? Because that is a cost to serve, right? And the client does not make a decision. How many times has that happened? You go forever, you build a relationship, and then unfortunately what happens, the client does not make a decision. So essentially what we're trying to say here is, ask yourself, by the way, these are all papers that if you're interested, I can send you those papers as well. Part of the papers you'll fall asleep, but the other parts are useful, right? So essentially what we're talking about here is that we should be taking a look at the opportunities that we have and start asking ourselves, how much of this is a complex task? The idea being, it's perfectly fine if you want to develop a client, but the key is, am I able to what is called value? Can I capture? Can I keep the cost of sale as low as possible, right? Because there's no point in investing a lot of time in a particular client where you might lose out on it. Now, what do I mean by capture the value? It's not always whether the customer buys from you or not. It could be, are you building goodwill with the client? Is the customer a reference client? Does that make sense? Is there a potential long-term? So how you define it is what is critical. And we spoke to 18 different companies, and each company has its own definition, but you will have to decide where I should be spending my best efforts. What does this mean to you as well? You should also be asking yourself, how should I be using my combination of marketing and sales efforts in each of this? Does it make sense? That's again something. So before you start thinking about what is a tech space, start asking yourself, right, where are my customers here, and what is the right combination of MarTech and sales tech and sales effort that we should be putting in there. Right? And that is something that we really have to start thinking about as well. And this is a slide where we talk about, by the way, this is not me coming up with it. It's sales leaders who gave us how they define a complex task or a complex opportunity. The number of people involved in the process, right? The length of the sales cycle, the uncertainty of customer needs, the number of people involved, everything, some of the things that you mentioned, cool out there. Right? So things like this is what will happen. What do I mean by value appropriation? What is the cost of sale? What is the cost of servicing the client? What do I mean by servicing? Client is anytime the customer asks you for information you provide. That is also servicing a client or a potential client, because that could be time spent on other opportunities. It makes sense. So you have to ask yourself, how much am I willing to forego on that one? Right? But then you can also take a look at, is the customer willing to pay for what we are providing? Is the client having a good referral potential? When I say client, it's again, I should be very careful in a room like this. It could be clients or potential prospects. What is the reference potential? So which means that if I work with that client, it's going to open doors elsewhere, right? So those are the kind of things that we should be talking about as well, right? So which means, what does the modern sales organization look like? This is again recent work. As I said, this is recent work which we did, where we started looking, one of my areas, I'm passionate about this idea of customer success managers. How many of you have heard the term customer success managers? Fantastic. So essentially, you know what it is, right? So essentially what we have is customer success managers. I remember the first time I heard customer success manager was in a program that I still run at Blenick, which is a business school here, and I do it every November. And I was there, it's called sales managers, and there was a person whose title was customer success manager. 2017 was the first time I heard it. I rolled my eyes and I said, here's another fancy term for a key account manager. Very soon you start understanding that it is quite different about what they do. Right? And this is something that we did. Essentially, if you map out the sales process, which is much more modular, so you have the BDRs, the SDRs, or if we paid attention to what Kuhn said, this would be an RDRs, would be a revenue development reps, right? Again, the question is, the revenue development reps is who's responsible for revenue development? Is it marketing, sales, or together? Okay? You have that. And then we talk about acquiring the client, and then handover that happens to customer success. But the interesting thing is that when we talk about intent data, if we talk about what is happening, we're talking about what is my customer doing? How am my customer engaging with me? Don't forget that your customer is also engaging already with your existing salespeople in your organization. Too many organizations work in silos where you don't have a clear vision of what's happening in your customer's organization. If I ask you around the room how long it takes for you to create a customer file, if you have to go have a conversation with a client, what do you think the answer is going to be? 2 days, 3 days? Hopefully not. The idea is that you have CS, you have customer success database, you will have something for marketing, you'll have something for sales, and each of them don't talk to each other. If you have to go talk to a client, it becomes that much more harder. So essentially what we have is we need to be thinking about the modern sales organization and what roles each play. Those of you interested in a fantastic book on how do you create a customer-centric organization? It's called Reorganize for Resilience. Send me an email, I'll send you the note. It's a great book as well. And this is not popular, but we are now looking at a new kind of function happening in organizations, and that is called what we call the MarOps function. Some companies already have it. What is MarOps? Marketing operations. So essentially, how do I use my marketing collateral? And essentially what we saw was this is where we talked to a lot of marketing folks in B2B companies. So what they have done is that based on our interviews, they kind of identify 3 phases. This is simplifying it: pre-purchase, purchase, and post-purchase. And then what they do is that, but they then say, going back to what we have, the 4 different kind of clients. Normally you have the pyramid, right? Your ABC clients. I typically call them your one-off purchases. Here would be your one-night stands. The repeat purchases would be friends with benefits. The one where you need to be spending more time on is what I call meet the parents. And then you have a complex continuous exchange where you have to deal with the wife's family or the husband's family forever, right? Each one of them has a different role to be played by marketing and sales. And you should start asking yourself what kind of marketing touch points you need to have, what kind of collateral needs to be done, and how do I allocate my sales force to those things. Again, this is something that you need to be thinking about. And most of you, if you have multiple products, you'll see that your products fit into these categories. In fact, you will be in situations where you'll have a portfolio of clients who are in different stages there. Again, now ask yourself, what is my MarTech and sales tech going to be? But be aware that I believe the word that is being used right now is called Frankenstack. You know what Frankenstack is? You know Frankenstein, right? So essentially you have Frankenstack is, there are too many people that I know right now. So Frankenstack is where you have this Frankenstein. So essentially you have too many technologies, not necessarily put together, so that it becomes hell for the sales and marketing folks as well, right? So that's again something that you need to be thinking about. This one is one thing that we did, and this is all in the interest of time. I'm going to jump all this. I'm just going to go to one slide. This is it. I'm going to kind of end with this, end with the last couple of slides. This is what we call as a multi-channel sales orchestrator. This is the salesperson, in my opinion, of the future, right? A person who might have some or all of these responsibilities as well. Now, theoretically, this should not be happening, right? You're going to have a separate function within your organization. Honestly, if you're working for a subsidiary in Belgium, guess what you're going to be doing? You're going to have that one person who's doing hunting and farming. And of course, if you combine hunting and farming together, you get farting, right? Sorry about that. So the idea is that you're hunting and farming. So essentially what you have is you're going to have a salesperson of the future who needs to be looking at, okay, how do I take care of my existing clients? How do I take care of new prospective clients, right? If I have to kind of see certain clients want to visit me face to face, certain clients are perfectly fine if I send them information. Certain clients are in more advanced stages where I need to be looking at firefighting, I need to be looking at opportunities. So essentially what you have is these are all the behaviors. In our opinion, this is actually data from a company that gave us access to it. These were all the behaviors that the best performing salespeople were doing, right? And then what happens is that essentially to help them manage this as sales leaders, you should start asking yourself, well, first of all, is if I want my salespeople to be doing this, what kind of salesperson do I want? Make sense? What kind of salesperson do I want? What kind of customers are they talking to, right? Then, what can we do to support them? If increasingly you're moving towards e-commerce, what should I be doing out there? How dynamic is my market? The more dynamic it is, the more it's going to be very hard for you to be helping your salespeople there. And the last one is, what are the consequences of this? And too many times what you're going to do is, yesterday I was talking to a company where based on this or something similar to this, they have created competency levels, right? And the beauty of it is that they have these competency levels and every salesperson has to fill out a self-evaluation questionnaire. And guess what's going to happen based on that? They have come up with an AI platform to help them, which will tell them based on your scores, these are the kind of training programs you should be taking. You know what the problem there is? There's no connection between that competency and how they're measured. So guess what's going to happen to the training programs? Not too many people taking it. They're saying that we still have problems filling these training programs. And guess what top management is saying? Okay. What does top management say? We're going to pull the plug on this program, no more training. Again, ask yourself, most of the time, before I want to start investing in this, oh my God, we need to, the reason why we're not doing so well, we don't have technology. First ask yourself, do we have a very clearly defined sales process? Do we know how are we going to populate the leads in that? Who is going to be responsible for that? And then based on that, how are we then going to expect our salespeople to change the way they behave? Then start talking about how are we enabling the sales team. That's what you're going to talk about. Sales enablement, another buzzword. We did research in a company right now. There is no alignment within their own organization about what sales enablement is. We got 4 different explanations of what sales enablement is in the same company. We talked to a sales manager, we talked to a marketing manager, we talked to a sales enablement manager, and the sales director. 4 different definitions. How many of you can vouch for the fact that you have the same definition as well? Right? So essentially, I'm going to kind of wrap it up with that because in the interest of time, and the next person who's probably going to say something more interesting than I do have some what kind of things you need to be looking at, some key tips for sales professionals and leaders. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to leave you, I like this as well. No matter what you do, don't focus on your sales organization too much before losing track of the customer. Right? At the end of the day, we are still out there because we need to provide solutions for the customer. Solutions not defined by you. Solutions not like what Ford said when he said you can buy a car in whatever color you want as long as it's black. That's not a solution. That's how you define a solution. Right? The question is, how do I make sure that the customer's requirements are met? And a lot of times your customers don't even know what their needs are. That's what I tell my wife. Before she met me, she did not know what she was missing. She's my only client, by the way. So there you go. That's me. I do have a free YouTube channel, which was with the previous place where I used to work. If you're interested, you can go follow it. And then I'll also be setting one up. It's a lot of free content there as well. So it is, you go in here, it's bit.ly.com, and then it's B, that's where I used to work, Ball State University Sales Center. Right? There's a lot of articles there, you can go, and there are playlists as well. Essentially, that is something where you'll find a lot of free content. I've also interviewed people from your colleagues in the past, but that's something that I want to work on. We also do a lot of research that contributes to this kind of work. In return, we'll also give you some thoughts about what is happening there as well. So I wish you all wonderful learning. And the next person who's talking, I apologize for taking your time. Who's talking next? I'm so sorry about that. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your questions.